Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons. And on today's show, we got to get you all caught up with the NLDS, the ALDS, and who better than the man from everywhere. Leo, you might just have to tell me what sites and what companies you don't work for. You might know his work from FanGraphs, Just Baseball, MLB Trade Rumors. It's Leo Morgenstern. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to discussing this NLDS we got going on here.
Are you sure you wanted to? Did you not see Game 3? I guess you're just being polite. I appreciate that. Well, but before we dive into that, do want to point out for the Rockies fans out there, Arizona Fall League did get kicked off on Tuesday night for the Salt River Rafters. Had 3 Rockies in the starting lineup: shortstop DH Ryan Ritter, Juan Guerrero, Skylar Messenger. Got RBIs from Ritter and Messenger, and a solid outing on the pitchers in regards to Michael Persecki, 2 scoreless frames, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, and a scoreless inning by Evan Justice. Phillies have an interesting prospect, obviously, in Andrew Painter there. How much do you keep an eye on the Arizona Fall League as a guy who's, very much invested and has his eyes on the Phillies? And if your answer is not that much because the Phillies still are playing relevant games in October, that might just have to end the interview right here.
Okay, I'll have to lie for this one. No, it's definitely exciting to see that Painter's going to be pitching in the Fall League. I mean, I would caution anyone against putting too much stock in his performance because it's just been so long since he pitched. It's exciting because he's on a mound, and anything else that happens is gravy. So that's why it's okay to focus on the postseason, focus on the NLDS, and just be happy. Keep in the back of your mind to know that Painter's going to be around next year, and that's a really exciting thing.
He'll be somebody to watch for anyone that does go down to the Arizona Fall League. He'll be on the Glendale team along with some of those Dodgers prospects. And as you mentioned, Painter, who I remember in spring training in 2023, there was a serious buzz about him in that age 20 season. Like maybe, if he didn't make the opening day roster, he might contribute kind of early. Unfortunately, as you alluded to, did need Tommy John surgery. So still just 21 years old on the comeback trail. Similar path to a couple Rockies prospects in McCade Brown and Gabriel Hughes, who are also returning from Tommy John surgery. I do want to get your opinion. It's always good and important to get outsiders' opinion from those that are not in the Denver area. But when it comes to the Colorado Rockies, I want to know your general thoughts, but I'll point you down a couple of paths here. Bud Black, the news did break on Tuesday that Bud Black is coming back for a 9th season. What were your interpretations of that move coming off of 200 lost seasons? A guy that had navigated them to back-to-back postseasons in 2017, 2018, now tied for the 4th longest tenured manager in baseball. Was that a surprise? Was that confusing? Par for the course for the Rockies?
Yeah, I actually got to write about the Bud Black extension for MLB Trade Rumors the other day, so it's fresh on the mind. I saw when I posted that, I saw a lot of criticism. It seemed like, at least online, there was a lot of chorus of, why are we bringing this guy back? Let's try something new. Personally, I don't really see the point of bringing in a new manager right now. If you're the Rockies, you've got a guy who has not had a lot of success recently, but also has not had a lot to work with. He's got experience, and it doesn't necessarily seem like a great or fair situation to be throwing a new manager into. Without much close knowledge, I say you let Black work with this new emerging core, see if he can get something out of them, and then if a year or two down the line things are not progressing the way you'd like them to, that's when you consider bringing in someone new to actually jumpstart the Rockies getting back into contention. But right now, you're searching for a new manager, and you're not really going to be able to see what he can do because next year will be a rebuilding year anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong about next year being a rebuilding year, but I do not see the Rockies doing a whole lot better than they did in 2024.
What's going on? I appreciate you jumping in the chat over on YouTube. No, you're absolutely right. And I think some of this could be an indicator that maybe the Rockies front office don't really think they are going to be bridging a major gap. I think they would like to, so that maybe 2026 is that season. If you look down the road and say 2 years, again, bridging the gap in 2025, it does feel like they've been talking about bridging the gap and, hey, in 2-3 years, we'll be ready, 2-3 years. And it's this perpetual kicking the can down the road. So On one hand, I could see why just having a new voice in the clubhouse, maybe you get more out of that, but you're certainly not going to go and make a move for a veteran guy like the Rangers did in a Bruce Bochy, where, hey, the right skipper could help navigate us to a deeper run in the postseason, or like the Mets were hoping for with a Buck Showalter. You kind of already have a proven major league manager that can work a clubhouse. So you're not going to go that route. And as you said, it is a difficult situation to maybe put a first-year manager in. And if you're not going to go that route for a fresh voice, you might as well just kind of have a steadying force. So I definitely understand a lot of the pushback from the fan base of like, let's try something new. We know it's not working, but for those who've been following the Rockies long enough, it's not one thing that the Rockies need that's new that's going to fix a lot of different things. So again, somewhat par for the course. Is Brenton Doyle very clearly the face of the franchise right now? Because everyone I ask, they always put Doyle number one. Do you see it a different way? Are there any other intriguing figures, or are you going to go a route and say, in a strange way, Chris Bryant is the face of the franchise because he's been broken down. He's a rebuilding player. They're a rebuilding team. So in a weird way, that's who comes to mind. What do you think about when you hear Rockies and tying it to a player?
I mean, I think if you asked anyone, especially outside of Colorado, to name a Rockies player, it still might be Bryant. So if that's your argument, maybe he's the face. But I mean, Doyle had a fantastic season. Tovar is the other guy you could point to as an emerging face of the franchise, and he's got that extension. I don't know what Doyle's contract situation looks like, so that could be the argument for Tovar. But those two both of them were really exciting this year. Really fun to watch.
Yeah, they've been really good. And the Padres have been really good. They won on Tuesday night 6-4. They broke out for a big 6-run second inning to take down the Dodgers at Petco Park. Padres in this game, they gave up a grand slam. They scored in only one inning, and they didn't score after the second inning. In the history of baseball, not just the postseason, but in the history of baseball, no team had ever done that and won the game. So, look, the Padres right now, they definitely have the momentum. And we know how good the Dodgers are as a team. That being said, this is a must-win game in Game 4 on Wednesday, and momentum really seems to be the name of the game. We've yet to see one of these teams that gets the first round bye in the NL win a series. They're 0-4 right now, and they're about to be 0-6. Do you think it's the Padres just to have the momentum here going forward, and they're probably the team to beat right now in the series?
Yeah, that's a great stat. I mean, hard to argue with that. If I was trying to play devil's advocate, or maybe if I was imagining myself in the Dodgers clubhouse, what you say to motivate them is that they held the Padres scoreless for the rest of that game. Padres, there's two ways to look at the situation. Every game, there's two sides to it. Padres, you can call it a historic win. You can also say they had one good inning. So personally, I'm pretty excited about the Padres. I think if they win this series, and it's looking like they're going to, that they might be the World Series favorite. They might be my World Series pick. But there's always a way to flip the narrative, and one game could make all the difference in that for the Dodgers. So, yeah.
I was going to ask you this when we talked about the Phillies, but now's probably a good time. Do you have a problem with the postseason setup that we have right now? Because I can see how a lot of fans do have that feeling, especially if you're a club that wins 95 plus games and you get a first round bye and you say, hey, we were one of the top 2 teams in baseball, and you got to get through a gauntlet of games. You still have to win 11 games to win a World Series, 7 to just get to the World Series, when, long time ago, if we're talking about our fathers, aunts, uncles, grandparents, you won your division, you won your league, you went right to the World Series, or you had one round of postseason. So it becomes a whole other season unto itself where anybody can truly win, especially now that you've got teams that don't just have to win a single wildcard game, but they have to now win a series. And I feel like that gives them extra momentum going into the division round.
Yeah, I mean, I completely get why somebody would be upset with the postseason format if we saw the Phillies eliminated in this round. Then again, we do have to remember the Phillies really benefited from this format, from that momentum in 2022 and 2023. And we don't want to be the ones turning around and complaining about that now. I think there was a lot of back and forth between Phillies fans and Braves fans, with Braves fans complaining about that time off and Phillies fans calling them babies. And the one thing we cannot do, and this is my message to all Phillies fans on the internet, in the ballpark, if we get back to Citizens Bank Park, is do not become that other side of it. Don't start complaining about the lack of momentum now. Look, it'll be really disappointing if they can't pull this off, but I'm not convinced that extra time off wasn't still an advantage for the Phillies. We saw Wheeler and Nola both with big velocity bumps in their starts, and that could definitely be a factor of having that extra time off to rest up their arms. And I also think that this might get me a little bit of hate, but don't discount the Mets. Like, this isn't just a team that got hot at the perfect time. This is a team that had a rough couple months at the beginning of the year and has played better baseball than the Phillies for probably since June. And that's the majority of the season. So it's not the Mets getting lucky in a 5-game series and toppling the Goliath. This is a really great competition between two great teams. And if the Phillies can't pull it off, that's all on them.
Yeah, I'm okay with the postseason setup. I think that it does allow for a lot more of these kind of upsets, but it is allowing a lot more teams to get into October, and it is kind of allowing the have-nots to hang out with the haves. And the opposite would be less postseason baseball. No one really wants that. And then totally restructuring how everything happens in the regular season. So maybe you can have more balanced rosters, similar to the NFL, where, if you're down, you're not down for 6 years or so, like with the Rockies. It's just almost easier to say, hey, we'll make more playoff spots. All you got to do is be a little bit better than 500. You get into the postseason and you can go out and have a little bit of fun. In the chat, from a Dodgers fan, look, they're trying to sidle up to the Rockies fans and say, hey, Coors Field is pretty cool. Could you root for the Dodgers? That's not going to happen for most Rockies fans. In fact, I don't know if it's going to happen for any Rockies fans. They're probably a little more inclined to still pull for the Padres than the Dodgers. But in terms of stadiums, Leo, little bit off topic, but do you have any favorite ones that you've gone to that maybe is underrated, or is just kind of, hey, you know what? Everyone loves this ballpark, as do I, and there's a million reasons why.
Yeah, I haven't been to too many ballparks, but I've been to a handful of the East Coast ones. Citi Field was my favorite. Is my favorite ballpark I've been to, which again, I feel like I'm being too Mets positive on this podcast right now, but Citi Field, absolutely beautiful. And I was sitting in the worst seats in the house, and it was still an absolutely incredible view and incredible experience. I've never been a big fan of the Rogers Center, which is my home ballpark living in Toronto. I will say though, they've done a lot of work in the past couple of years to renovate it, to improve the look of the park and the experience. So if you haven't been to Toronto in the last few years, or if you're too harshly judging the Rogers Center based on an experience from a few years ago, come back. I promise you'll like it a lot more after all the renovations. And I'm pretty sure they're still working on it every offseason.
Yeah, I know a lot of different teams with those older ballparks. When we say old, we're talking like 30 years, right? It's really not that old. But the Rogers Center is one of the oldest ones. It's probably at this point maybe the 7th or 8th oldest in MLB. So yeah, you got to renovate rather than get a brand new ballpark. It's easier to do that. And there's a lot of history. Like, I think Rogers Center is one of those ballparks you might not think about having a ton of history, but I think there is. Obviously 2 World Series in 92, 93. At least 1 All-Star game. So that's a modern classic in a sense, in a lot of different ways, as far as, again, the history is concerned, and the retractable roof and whatnot. That is one I've yet to cross off my list. So I may have to get up there. Fernando Tatis Jr., man, this guy, he's ascending to another level. He's been in his 10 postseason games. He's got 5 homers, a 1528 OPS. But in this postseason, in his 5 games, he's batting .625, 7 RBI, 4 homers in those 5 games. Hasn't struck out once. Only one other player has done that. That's Lou Gehrig, and he did it over multiple postseasons. I don't know what to say right now about Fernando Tatis Jr., but he has to be right now, even more so than Shohei Otani, because of the time of the year. It's a little bit of a recency bias, but I think Tatis Jr. is probably the last guy you want up at the plate when your team is in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's got he's got Bryce Harper energy. I felt that way about him for a long time, and they both just have that special. This is a guy you want at the plate in a big moment, and he's going to make it exciting. And Tatis is having more success doing that than Harper right now. But wow.
Yeah, it's definitely like a new school baseball energy, because you're right. When you think of a baseball player, the guys that are just standard ball players that you could put back in any era, they're not necessarily exciting. They're great ball players, but they play the game the right way, air quotes, right? But you're right. Harper was one of those first guys in the early 2010s to have a little bit of electricity. And I think we've seen a lot of players, after him, certainly a lot of players in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s from Latin America had that bit of flair, but it wasn't fully accepted. And now we have that, and we have a new generation of guys. And when you're like that, you're definitely going to become a villain. Harper was a villain for a while. I think, baseball fans in general, unless maybe you're a Mets fan, you probably have taken to Bryce Harper a lot more than when he was coming up at 19, 20, 21 years old. I think people are pulled in by him a little bit more, in his personality and his ability to say, hey, I do love Philadelphia, and kind of, being that player for that city. Whereas Tatis Jr. right now, he's definitely in that villain mode status, and he's using that to his advantage right now.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously he's got the PED stuff working against him, but I do hope that eventually he gets that same treatment where more fans around the game come around and say, okay, maybe it's fun to see him as a villain, all in good fun, but this guy is really important to the game. He brings an incredible energy. He's so much fun to watch, and it's just silly if you're really hating on him rather than appreciating what a special player he is.
Yeah, no, I agree. If what he does maybe gets on your nerves, that's fine. That's okay. But it really, I don't think it should, go beyond that, because you should be appreciating what this player has been doing. He's very much been special. The Around the Ballpark podcast say, looking forward to the Tatis Winker heel heat next series. I was thinking of that this morning, about how Jesse Winker is becoming that for the Mets, and Tatis Jr. Yeah, that would be very interesting, to say the least. Maybe game one is just two guys in a circle of ball players in the parking lot duking it out, and whoever wins that one, that's who gets game one. And then we can start playing baseball after that, get the fight out of the way. We talk about these prototypical baseball players and who comes to mind. Shohei Otani, he's just a unicorn. So we're overlooking him a little bit, but he's just this unicorn on another level. He's been a little bit quiet, right? He had a home run in game one there in his first ever postseason game. Good for him. In the fifth inning of Tuesday night's game, hit one for 385. That would have been a homer at Dodgers Stadium. Unfortunately, not at Petco Park. It's too small of a sample size to say, oh, the postseason has gotten too big for him, because again, in these short series, if you just lose a little bit of that momentum, which we'll talk about here when it comes to the Phillies, you can just be out that quick. So I for one, cannot necessarily determine, oh man, Shohei Otani can't live up in those big spots, because we saw him do it in the World Baseball Classic against his teammate coming out to pitch. I for one, would not be a fan of that narrative.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who has just been exceeding expectations consistently. He came into this year, he wasn't going to pitch. Everyone was qualifying their expectations for him. Like saying he's probably not an MVP if he's only DHing. And then, of course, he is. So, and then, yeah, for most players, you'd say, okay, it's his first postseason. It's a huge stage. Let's temper our expectations. But at this point, Otani, there's no tempering expectations for Otani, and anything less than being the absolute best player on the field every game seems disappointing. I hope he gets the chance to do that. But if he goes down quiet, then, there's so many other players that we're excited about. I mean, it's nice to see Betts finally get something going in the most recent game. There are a lot of great players in the game besides Shohei Otani. I'm not trying to hate on how much love Shohei Otani gets. It's all deserved. He deserves all that attention. But he's not gonna come through every single at bat every single time, and that's okay.
And it's interesting talking about Otani in this fashion of like, the odds are against him because he's a DH only. And I think they were at the beginning of the season. And then as he continued to set records, break certain milestones, and the more that there wasn't any threat. There was no one out there. Just as Ketel Marte seemed to be heating up in early mid-August, he went on the IL and his chances diminished. And Francisco Lindor was a little bit too late to turn it on to really challenge Otani. And because there's a game every day and Otani's in there 162, if he goes quiet for a day, it's not a big deal because he's got another opportunity. But in the postseason, it's interesting. I think it is a little bit different because when you think about the fact that, okay, if you don't come through with runners in scoring position in a spot, it's going to be a while before you have the chance to build any momentum because you're not playing defense. Whereas if Fernando Tatis Jr. or Jurickson Profar strikes out with the bases loaded, man, that's rough. You're going to get another shot later on in the game, but you can make an impact somewhere defensively or even just make a routine play, which sounds silly, but you feel good like, okay, cool. I have more momentum than I did before. Whereas Otani just has to sit and wait and he can disappear, right? If you're a fan watching that game, if you're DH only, you disappear for a while and it makes those moments that much more heavier, have that much more value. Whereas for every other player, they have an opportunity to, build up these points within themselves or within the fan base or the audience watching to say, okay, all right, some things are maybe going this guy's way a little bit more. There reduces the pressure in a sense on them because you are playing defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a critical point about Otani's season in general, too, is that one reason why he's such a unicorn for a DH is because if he wasn't a two-way player, he'd be an outfielder and he'd be one of the best outfielders in baseball, I think. I mean, a guy who moves that fast and is that athletic and picks up skills so quickly. Like, one reason we've never seen a DH like this is because most guys with this kind of skill set who run the way he does wouldn't be DHs. And so, yeah, we're seeing something a little different with a player like this. And yeah, it's too bad that we don't get to see him in the fields. I will also say I was watching, this was one of the last Sunday night baseballs of the regular season, and they did a great feature where they went down and they showed what Kyle Schwarber does while the Phillies are out playing defense, and they were just chatting with him while he spends the whole time down in the cage. And it's cool to see that. I wish you got to see that more often. You got to see that, these DHs they're always on. They're working the whole game. They're not lazing around and then get enough to take their at-bats. And I think it would keep the momentum going a little more if we got even just that Otani cam, that little glimpse of him, what he's doing while the rest of the Dodgers are out there to stay hot and stay fresh.
Okay, well, you're going to be writing for MLB.com and working for MLB with these ideas. Otani cam? Yeah, how is this not a thing? And you know what? You don't need to put cameras around the ballpark. Just put a little, a lipstick camera on the end of his baseball cap, on his brim, and it's just shooting him just 24/7. Yeah, you can have a subscription service if you need that. And it was what you were saying about, like, I thought you were going to go in one direction talking about him being a DH. Why haven't we seen a DH like this before? Because no DH has ever, or no position player has ever pitched. The only reason he's DH is because of the Tommy John thing. And again, I think everyone understands that, but it's still just a situation where, you know what, right now, bottom line is you're only playing half the game when you're hitting, but when you're doing it at a 50-50 plus pace and there's nobody else that's really coming close to you, it makes sense why he's more likely than not going to be the unanimous MVP in the National League. I'm curious of your thoughts talking about Mets and Phillies, because these are two fan bases and two teams, two ballparks that are fairly close together. Where I grew up originally in New Jersey, I was kind of equidistant to New York City and Philadelphia. It was a little bit harder to get to Queens than it was to get to Citizens Bank Park or Veterans Stadium at the time. But you could have fans going to all of these games, and the Padres actually had Operation Keep Out Dodgers fans, and they didn't allow certain area codes to buy tickets because they wanted to make sure that it was Padres fans at Petco Park. Is that something that you're okay with? I'm okay with it because in certain instances like this, you do want your fans to be in your ballpark so that they can benefit from a postseason, especially when you don't get a ton of them.
Yeah, I remember that causing some drama with the Phillies and Nationals a handful of years back, that the Nationals were stopping Phillies fans from flooding the ballpark. And I mean, look, if fans are passionate enough that they're coming out there and they're the ones buying the tickets, I feel a little bad if they're getting stonewalled. But I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Your home field advantage should be your home field advantage. Hometown fans should get to watch their hometown team play. Seems especially, I mean, it seems a little mean-spirited to be going to somebody else's ballpark and booing them down. And no disrespect to any dedicated Phillies fans who are dedicated enough to go do that to try to support their team in any other city. But yeah, I get it. I mean, it's nice to be a fan surrounded by other fans of the hometown team, watching the hometown team play. I've gone to the most games in my life at Rogers Center in Toronto, and when the Yankees come to town, there is a huge contingent of people that drive up from parts of New York State where Toronto is actually closer to them than New York City, and the ballpark ticket prices double, and the ballpark is full of Yankees fans. And if the two teams are both playing well and there's some rivalry there, it can be fun. But I can also see, especially to a kid, it's a little disappointing. You want to go and root with your local fans, and instead you're surrounded by people antagonizing your team.
Yeah, it's almost haves and have-nots if you're from a bigger market like that. Dodgers fans, Yankees fans versus Blue Jays, Padres. You got two extremes, and you have to do some of those things where if all things are equal, it's like, hey, first come, first serve. Everyone wants to get in there. It's a hot ticket. When it's not, you're going to see your favorite team. Rockies fans deal with that a lot where they come in and, I mean, shoot, you have, as far as I know, and I imagine this is a first, but the Rockies lost their 100th game of the season, and it was a sold-out crowd. Now, a lot of that had to do with Charlie Blackmon on his way out and retiring, but also the Dodgers were in town. So I don't think that's ever happened personally. But, again, when you want to go and watch your team or even watch the other team and you're from that city, it can definitely ruin the taste of your experience a little bit if you've got those opposing fans in the ballpark. Mets Phillies game 3. Mets end up winning 7-2. Phillies, they're struggling to score early. They're not getting deep in counts. Schwarber, Turner, Bohm combined 6 for 33 with one extra base hit, that being a Schwarber home run. Is this just a matter of a small sample size and going up against some unfortunate great starting pitching like Sean Manaea in game 3?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you don't want to overreact too much to one game like that. But as good as Manaea was, and you don't want to take anything away from his performance, like it felt like there were so many moments the Phillies could have got something going, and every single time they ruined it for themselves. Like Manaea did a great job, but he wasn't always at his sharpest. There was that first inning where a lot of Phillies fans were pointing out that all 3 balls the Phillies hit were over 105 miles an hour, but all of them went right into a fielder's glove. There's an inning where Manaea walked the first 2 batters he faced, but then Bryce Harper strikes out swinging on 3 pitches. Nick Castellanos hits into a double play. It just felt every time the Phillies got something going in that game, they ruined it for themselves. Alec Bohm, who's been really cold, he gets a great hit and then gets out trying to stretch a single into a double. And it was that was the theme of the game constantly. The Phillies were beating themselves, and the Mets were playing great baseball, so beating them even further. It was just really disappointing to watch. They've got another left-handed pitcher today in Jose Quintana, and it's a little concerning with how little they were able to do against Manaea, but Quintana's not Manaea, so hopefully they're able to get a little something more going with a slightly more favorable pitching matchup.
Yeah, you mentioned stretching that single into a double and unfortunately not working, and maybe trying to be aggressive to try to gain somewhat of an advantage. And that seems what you almost have to do in the postseason, because you can't be patient because these series are so short. It's one of the reasons why Rob Thompson said after Tuesday's game, everyone's available. He was asked specifically about Wheeler, and he's like, I mean, yeah, pretty much everybody's available. On the flip side,
sorry to interrupt you, but you see, he says that, and then he's gone to Jose Ruiz twice now, Jose Ruiz has had a solid season, but Phillies have some excellent high leverage relievers. Jose Ruiz is not one of them. This was something that really got on my nerves in the game yesterday. It ultimately didn't end up mattering because the offense only scored a couple of runs. But why do you go to Jose Ruiz in a high leverage spot when you have Estevez, you have Strom, you have Hoffman? All of them had a full day of rest from the off day. Everyone should be available in this moment. Why isn't Thompson managing that way? And then it's just extra frustrating to hear him make a comment like that after the game when it doesn't reflect the way that he's managing the game.
Yeah, again, is it that pressure? Is it that I feel a little bit more comfortable with these guys over the others? Which, again, the three relievers you mentioned, they were all stars this year, right? Estevez for the Angels and comes over in that trade, and they're all former NL West guys. In fact, Estevez and Hoffman, two former Rockies guys. So, if everyone is hateable in the National League to a Rockies fans, you might pull for the Phillies because they've got a couple of extra former Rockies on that roster. So it's going to be interesting. You have to push all of the right buttons in this game. And the fact, as you said, with a lefty starting pitcher, a veteran like Jose Quintana at home at Citi Field, it's definitely going to make it hard for the Phillies to win that. But that's all they got to do is win today. And then game 5, it's anyone's guess. Question in the chat: in an elimination game like this, when the Phillies lineup comes up a third time, if you're manager Carlos Mendoza, the starter is hot. Are you sticking with that route, or are you going with a new arm in the top of the inning, or is that really, again, just a situational matchup kind of situation that you're going to have there, dependent on the game and who's coming up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you do have those two super dangerous lefties at the top of the Phillies lineup, in Schwarber and Harper, and I don't think the Mets have a great left-handed specialist in the bullpen. Quintana's a lefty, so if he's doing well, I could completely see the argument for why you keep him in, at least to face Schwarber and Harper one more time. We saw that Schwarber and Harper didn't really get anything going against the lefty Minaya last night, so why not try that again? But after that, if you get past Harper, I don't see why Mendoza wouldn't have a relatively short hook on Quintana, because Minaya let the bullpen get so much rest yesterday. He's got a fully healthy bullpen. He's got a rested bullpen. Why not try to get as much out of those guys as you can?
And with the day off on Thursday and maybe the season off for the Phillies, again, everyone's gone, but for the Mets, they're going to have at least a day off, maybe more. So they can go to that bullpen and lean on those guys if they need to, because there's obviously going to be no penalty on that. We got today Ranger Suarez and Jose Quintana coming up at 3:08 Mountain Time in the NL. Dodgers are going with a bullpen game against Dylan Cease. I think that's just normal. It still gives me pause when you hear something like that, but we know that that's just kind of commonplace in the postseason, especially if you've got some of those swingman type pitchers that can go maybe 2, 3, 4 innings, just ride the hot hand. So that's postseason baseball in 2024. In the American League, Guardians Tigers tied up 1-1. Alex Cobb versus Cater Montero, who looked Cy Young-esque against the Rockies late in the season. Over in Kansas City in the other ALDS series, Game 3, Clark Schmidt versus Seth Lugo. We had 1-1 series in both of these. Like, it's anybody's championship to win. I think it may end up being a lot like last year when you had the Rangers and Diamondbacks, two teams that nobody thought would be playing in the end. So for that reason, we're going to get Mets Royals again, like in 2015?
That would be a pretty interesting matchup. It's obviously not what I'm rooting for, but that would be pretty cool. Mets Tigers too would be pretty interesting to see, but we'll see what we get.
Yeah, it's look, that's why we watch these games. We got 4 today. This will be our last day with 4 games. So very exciting. Hopefully you've already planned ahead and you were coughing on your way out of the office yesterday to lay groundwork for the sick day. And now for the rest of the year, you do need to show up to work. But 4 games today is a big one. Leo, this was a lot of fun, man. Go ahead and plug away. Keep the plugs down to about 3.5 minutes if you can, for all the different places that you do great work at.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It was a great time. You can read my work at Just Baseball, FanGraphs, MLB Trade Rumors. I think that's all. I'm going to keep it to one sentence. That's all I need to say right now.
Oh,
you can follow me on Twitter/X at Morgenstern MLB.
Yeah, definitely make sure you're checking out all of his work. Just go to Google, type in his name, and all of his great stuff will come up. Definitely one of my favorite reads here, in all seriousness. So thanks again, Leo, for joining me. I'm at Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons MLB. Also, make sure you're going over to the YouTube page, liking, reviewing, subscribing to the channel, podcast, anywhere you listen to it. Big appreciation. Leo, you gave me plenty of momentum, but as I like to say in the podcast world, that momentum is only as good as my next show. So I'll talk to you then.